YouTube, I've come to review Doctor Strange. YouTube, I've come to review Doctor Strange. YouTube, I've come to review Doctor Strange. If you've seen the movie, you'll understand that joke. Hope you all enjoyed that. And if you didn't, found it cringe, I'm sorry. Mostly. What's up guys, my name is Ryan, welcome to my channel if you are new here. So as I just said a million times, and as you can tell by the title, in this video I will be reviewing the 14th entry in the MCU, that being Doctor Strange. The next one on our MCU rewatch and review series is after I've watched the movie, so let's just jump into this review, and spoiler alert if you have not seen the film. Doctor Strange is a MCU film that I was really interested in going back to because it's one of those MCU films that I haven't gone back and rewatched in a really long time, so I was curious as to whether my opinion on it would go up or down at all. I remember it being just a solid, good entry in the MCU, and that opinion hasn't changed. It's pretty much the same. This is just another solid, decent entry in the MCU. There's nothing really phenomenal or great about it, but there's nothing awful or horrible either. It's just consistently a decent, good film. We are introduced to another great character in the MCU in Dr. Stephen Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Once again, Marvel did a fantastic casting there, and the supporting cast is really good as well. You got Rachel McAdams as Christine Palmer, Doctor Strange's love interest in the film. I don't know the actor's name, like how to say it, but the guy who plays Baron Mordo, and then we got Benedict Wong as Wong. We got Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One. We got Mads Mikkelsen as one of our villains here, Caecilius. Once again, great cast that fits their roles all really well. I love getting some classic Doctor Strange lore and mythology in this film. Of course, you got the characters, but you've also got Doctor Strange, you know, he's a neurosurgeon in the beginning and losing the use of his hands, and then he goes to Kamar-Taj to hopefully find a way to heal his hands, and it's like his last resort and his last chance, and he ends up having his eyes open to this bigger, larger world full of wizardry and magic, and he realizes the world is a lot bigger and there are forces at play that he didn't know existed. And he starts learning how to be a sorcerer, and I just love his arc throughout this film. It's an arc that is kind of a bit familiar at this point in the MCU, specifically like when you're talking about Iron Man and Thor, you know, these stories of humility and this very prideful, selfish person being humbled and coming to care more about others than he does for himself. It's a bit familiar at this point, but I think the way they tackle it is still pretty good, but that is a little bit of a criticism I have with the film, is that it just feels a little bit generic by this point. But I do like how they tackle it and kind of come at it from a different angle, and with these people throughout the film just telling Stephen Strange that it's not about you. Stephen Strange in the beginning of the film is kind of a selfish person. He kind of thinks of himself very highly and kind of looks down upon others, kind of wants to control everything and know everything. And I love how just throughout this film he learns that he can't control everything, he doesn't know everything, especially when he goes to Kamar-Taj and the Ancient One opens his eyes to this vast, wider, bigger universe of magic and a multiverse. And I love when he goes to Kamar-Taj and Baron Mordo tells him that he has to kind of forget everything that he's known up to this point. And that's kind of why and we see him in the beginning when he first starts trying to learn magic, him struggling a bit, and I love when the Ancient One tells him that he kind of has to surrender, and like it doesn't always make sense. I thought that was really good because not everything in life does make sense, and we're not gonna know everything. One thing I love about Doctor Strange is this is probably one of the most visually pleasing films in the MCU, of course, like when they're doing magic with the sling rings and the portals opening up, and then you have like when he's like makes a weapon out of light, and he's using the whip to fight the Caecilius and his followers in the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York. And then the stuff with the cloak of levitation, how it's kind of like its own sentient being, and it stops Caecilius from stabbing Doctor Strange. And of course the famous Inception times 10 stuff where you have cities folding in on themselves and the mirror dimension. It's just very visually cool to watch. And of course I love when he gets the Eye of Agamotto, which they actually make the Time Stone, and I love how that comes into play and actually ends up being very important come the end of the film and defeating the big villain here, which is Dormammu. Very famous Doctor Strange villain. I grew up on Marvel shows like Avengers Assemble, Ultimate Spider-Man, Hulk and the Ages of Smash, and you know, Doctor Strange. They would have these episodes where Doctor Strange would appear, they would help him fight some villain, and it usually was Dormammu. So I like seeing these big Doctor Strange villains in this film. Of course, we also got Caecilius, who I actually didn't know existed before this film, but I did know Baron Mordo existed, another big Doctor Strange villain. I think it's interesting how they show how he really trusts in the Ancient One and in Kamar-Taj and what it's doing. But come the end of the film and discovering that the Ancient One isn't all she's, you know, cracked up to be, isn't completely telling the truth, and she's drawing power from the dark dimension, even though she's telling her students that it's a dangerous place and you can't draw power from there. And he kind of, like, he put the Ancient One up on this pedestal, and when he finds out that not everything she does is, like, good, he kind of falls a bit and loses faith, and he thinks the world just has too many sorcerers, and he's kind of... I really don't know what he's up to right now, because in the second Doctor Strange, the Baron Mordo we get, of course, isn't the normal one, so I'm interested in seeing what he's up to after all this time. I hope we get him back in the third Doctor Strange. But another criticism for me about this film is the villains are kind of put on the back burner. There's not much development and focus with them. There's not much to them. There's not much compelling or relatable. They don't have some emotional connection. There's not some emotional reason for what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, or they don't properly develop and bring that out. Primary focus is on Doctor Strange and his origin story, which I do enjoy, but I think I would have liked if the villains were a bit more prominent and well developed. Speaking of Doctor Strange, like I said earlier, I love his arc throughout the film. That's probably my favorite part of this film. Once again, I've said it a million times, I love stories of these prideful, arrogant people being humbled and coming to see that, hey, you don't have it all figured out, you're not perfect, and you know, you don't know it all. Like when he goes to Kamar-Taj for the first time and the Ancient One opens his eyes and he sees this vast multiverse, and he sees that the world is a lot bigger than he thought it was, and the Ancient One's like, you think you know how the world works? And she's like, who are you in this vast multiverse, Mr. Strange? And he just sees kind of how little he is in comparison to how big the multiverse is. I think it's interesting in the beginning, we get little talks between Christine and Steven about how he's a very famous neurosurgeon. I think they've said he's done some interviews on live television, and even when, you know, after he hurts his hands and he can't use them anymore, he goes to someone who he heard came back from a broken back injury and started to walk again because he went to Kamar-Taj, and he finds that person, and that person ends up being someone who came to Doctor Strange when his back was broken to try and get his help, and he says, I came to see you. You refused me. And then he says something like, I guess there's not much glory for you in that. There's just so many great lines throughout this film that are like, that characters say that kind of humble Steven, like in the beginning when Steven invites Christine to some seminar, I think, to go with him, and he's like, you love going to those with me. And then she says, they weren't about us though. They're about you. Everything is about you. And then later, after the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York is attacked, I love when he has that conversation with the Ancient One, and she tells him, you became a doctor to save your own life. There's just so many great convicting lines in the film for Stephen Strange, which I love. Then after that big fight, he says, you know, I just came here to heal my hands. I didn't come here to be this great sorcerer and save the universe and all that. And the Ancient One tells him, you want to go back to the delusion that you can control anything. Stephen Strange is just such this... He wants to be on top of everything, he wants to control everything and know everything, and he is really selfish and only primarily cares about himself and what he wants. He's not thinking about, like when his hands get damaged. I remember Christine at one point tells him that nobody could have done better, and he's like, I could have done better. And he's told that, you know, maybe these hurt hands are maybe another opportunity, maybe there's another way to save and help people, and he just refuses to see that and think about that. He just wants to go back to his normal life, doesn't even consider how becoming a sorcerer and helping people, he can help way more people as a sorcerer potentially. He's just being so selfish, and it reminds me of Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2 verses 3 and 4 says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. I think my favorite scene in this film is the end, that famous, you know, scene I referenced in the intro, that iconic MCU scene, Dormammu, I have come to bargain, when Doctor Strange goes into the dark dimension and he brings the time stone in there. And I love how earlier in the film they talk about how the dark dimension is a place kind of outside of time, and then he brings the time stone into the dark dimension and starts looping time and gets Dormammu caught in this time loop. I just thought that was so smart. I love little things like that in films where these little lines come back around and actually end up being very important and pivotal to the story. And he keeps saying, Dormammu, I have come to bargain, and he gets Dormammu trapped in this time loop, and Dormammu keeps killing him and refuses to listen to him. Then he starts to realize he's caught in this time loop. He's like, make it stop! And Dormammu keeps telling Doctor Strange to stop and free him from the time loop, but he refuses unless Dormammu stops his assault on Earth and takes his followers with him. And Dormammu just keeps killing Doctor Strange over and over again. And he's like, you can't do this forever. And he's like, yes, I can. And then he's like, you will spend an eternity dying. He's like, but everyone on Earth will be safe. And in that moment, Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange, finally learns to put others before himself, to care more about others than he does for himself. He's willing to spend an eternity dying over and over again just to keep the people of Earth safe. And I love when Dormammu tells him, you can't win. And he's like, no, but I can lose again, and again, and again, and again. And that makes you my prisoner. And Dormammu gets so stinking angry. And I just love seeing this prideful man, just such an arrogant kind of jerk, be humble and put himself last for once. And that's what we should do as Christians, is put others before ourselves and put God first and foremost, but then put others after God and before ourselves. And that's what Christ did. He put us before himself. He could have gone his whole life without experiencing pain and suffering. He could have never gone to that cross and saved us from our sins. He could have just left us to ourselves, but he loved us so much to come and die for us, and he put us before himself. He endured that pain for us. He endured such excruciating, unimaginable pain and suffering for us. He put us before himself because he loved us so much. And that's what Doctor Strange reminds me of. And that's what we're supposed to do as Christians, is to put others before ourselves as Christ did, and show the love of Christ that way. That was just a nice, good, biblical related message I thought we could pull out of this film. So overall, I think I'd give this film a 7 out of 10. Like I said, just a decent, solid film. Nothing like phenomenal, except maybe that Dormammu I've come to bargain scene. But nothing like super awful or horrible either. It's just, you know, decent throughout the entire film. I think one other criticism I have real quick though before I wrap this up is there's kind of some unrealistic moments, like when Doctor Strange goes to the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, and the Master, like the Sorcerer, like taking care of it and making sure no one breaks in. When Caecilius and his followers break in, I feel like they kill the guy so easily. He's supposed to be this master sorcerer, and they kill him so easily. But Doctor Strange is able to somehow hold his own against them and manages to survive, even though he's kind of a newbie and a novice to all this new magic, wizardry stuff. I just didn't really buy that. I thought, like, it's a cool fight scene visually and all that, and it's very fun flinging them through the different doors and sending them to different places in the world. But I don't know, that's just a bit unrealistic. But other than that, just like I said, generally just a good, decent Marvel MCU entry. But with that said, I think that's all I have to say about Doctor Strange. Let me know what you think of Doctor Strange down below. Would love to get into a conversation with y'all about this movie. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe right over here if you enjoy my content. Will so love and appreciate your support and helping me put more God-honoring Christian content out there into the world. If you want to watch my previous MCU review for Captain America Civil War, right over here, you can click that video, and right here's a playlist of all my MCU videos. If you are new here, you can catch up and watch all my previous MCU reviews and continue with me on this journey to watch and review every MCU film that will culminate in a ranking of all 37 films when I am finished. And with that, I hope y'all have a blessed one, guys. I'll see y'all in the next video.